Hi, welcome back to the 1776 Project podcast. Thank you guys again for being here this week. You know, we speak a lot about the subject matters when it comes to public schools, and there is a lot of overlapping situations between both public and private issues that both the parents of both private and public school children need to know and need to understand. Part of it's accountability, part of it is transparency, part of it is how parents can be more well informed of what's happening in public and private school. And I think that this episode is really, really important for that. And I want to warn you, this does deal with an issue of self-harm. So I want to advise anyone who's listening, maybe with small children in the room, to know what the subject matter is ahead of time. The parents I want to introduce you to are Rob and Rose Bronstein. They're wonderful parents. I've gotten to know Rose a little over the last few months, and they had the tragedy of their son, Nate, who took his own life on January 13th, 2022. Their son, Nate, was the victim of immense cyberbullying and isolation by fellow classmates at the Latin school. He was attending the Latin school, and the school and the administrators really were not proactive in telling them, and now they are suing the school, and they are looking to make reforms in both the law and in how schools and administrations in schools deal with the subject matter. So welcome to the show, Rob and Rose Bronstein.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So why don't you start off by just talking about your son, Nate?
Sure, I'll take that. So Nate was very smart, very witty. He, if there was something he was interested in, and the thing he was definitely interested in was sports and sports trivia, he would be just completely immersed in it, encyclopedic about the subject. He would go on and on and on about it. He had a great group of friends. He had two sisters. He had a group of cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents who all loved him, and he was just a very smart but otherwise typical kid, 15-year-old kid.
Now, he went to the Latin school in Chicago, and he received immense bullying on several apps, including TikTok. I know from someone, I'm only 36, but I know that this was not in the world that I grew up in, because there was no such thing as social media. You know,
Yeah.
You had a bad day at school, you dreaded the next day, but you were home, and that didn't follow you, and now it does. I'm not going to repeat things that were said to your son and the bullying that was said to your son that I've read online, but what did the administration of the school know about what was going on when it was happening?
So they knew a lot, and they didn't tell us anything. And I'll sort of, try my best to paint a picture of the timing. So our son only attended the Latin school for one semester. He was a student at a rival private school, and my wife and I were incredibly frustrated that rival school did not have in-person learning. And that school, this was during COVID. Thank you. So this was in the spring of 2021, and we were really beside ourselves that he and his sisters were not in person, and the school that he attended could not really guarantee that they would be in person by the fall, but the Latin school did. And so we applied him there. He got in, and that was the deciding factor for us. But what we didn't really appreciate, and he transferred in as a sophomore, what we didn't appreciate is just how really far too seriously the Latin school takes their rivalry toward this other school to a really disturbing and unpleasant level, the way they see those schools as a rival. And our son was sort of a representative of that school. And secondly, the Latin school did essentially nothing to help him acclimate to the new school, partly because he transferred in at an atypical grade, being the 10th grade. Most students enter in the 9th grade or earlier than that. And so there was really no way at all to prepare him or to integrate him in and to introduce him to kids. And so he was the subject of ostracization and bullying. And ultimately, the only thing that the school really could suggest to us is that he should join a sport. And my wife and I were optimistic about that because he was a good athlete and he loved sports, and his favorite sport was basketball. But he was on the golf team in the fall semester, and he joined basketball in the winter semester. And ultimately, where the very vicious and profane cyberbullying occurred was from his fellow members of the JV basketball team. And what we learned after the fact is that he went to the dean of students to complain about the cyberbullying. And despite it being their policy, despite it being state law here in Illinois, despite it being really the correct and common sense thing to do, that dean of students did not inform us. She also had an obligation to actually inform the bully's parents and begin an investigation. None of that occurred. We actually learned even more recently that another student was so disturbed also by the text chain that student went to the basketball coach and reported it to him. And the basketball coach, to our understanding, also did nothing.
Didn't do anything. So there was
so-
notice twice.
Yeah.
Two
and-
adults
So-
at the Latin school received notice that our son had been, our son had reported to the dean of students that he was being cyberbullied and wanted help to make it stop. And then a student who was part of the cyberbullying had realized that it didn't land well with our son, that our son was upset by it. And he went to the basketball coach and said, can you please check on Nate? You know, there's stuff went on text, you know, and I think he's upset by it. So twice. And neither adult took the duty of care to do something about it or look into it. So when our son went on Monday, December 13th, had an in-person meeting with the dean of students to report it, we never knew from December 13th until January 13th was the day that we lost him. We didn't find out about any of the cyberbullying, anything that it even happened until January 27th. So 2 weeks after we lost him was the first time that Rob and I had even been notified that that it happened.
But Ryan, I want to explain to you, because I think it's
I
important.
just want to put something in context. So your son enrolled only in either late August or early September. This is just a period of 3 months.
That's
where
correct.
It's
That's correct.
this intense that another child and children, you know, for all sense of purposes, kids are not sometimes have the best emotional awareness, but nonetheless, another child at least noticed it in this 3 month period of time, even though they probably didn't know him that well because it's only been, you know, a handful of months, could clearly tell there was something wrong.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned about your own age and your, you know, sort of how you grew up with or without social media. I think maybe a young person, one of his peers, could appreciate how real and visceral something that occurs online is, maybe in the way that a basketball coach or the dean of students, who, by the way, must know how to deal with it. They should be trained, they should be equipped, they should follow the law. But I could also appreciate how maybe a peer, you know, what these kids, how they interact with each other online is as real, if not more real, than the way that they interact in person. And I don't know if school administrators are quite have recognized that you know, young people spend 4, 5, 6 hours a day online, typically in social media or online gaming. Okay, and these interactions are as real as can be. Right. And like you pointed out, when they go home, the difference between the schoolyard taunting of yesteryear and today is when they go home. I mean, this bullying continued till the 12 midnight or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Like there's no escape from it, because as long as you have a phone and an internet connection, that follows you there. And it's a real failure on the part of this school and other school to recognize that, whether they like it or not, their responsibilities to understand how students are interacting with each other and to enforce their rules now extend basically 24/7. But in our particular case, the only reason we found out about it, because the school had no intention of ever telling us, the only reason we found out about it is after we lost our son. Several days later, the mother of another boy on the team demanded a meeting with the headmaster, and she met with him and 3 other administrators and put it all in front of them. We later learned that they had it all, but nonetheless, she believed she was telling them for the first time and demanded that they hold people accountable and do something about it
Ross
and
was
inform
another.
us. I beg your pardon?
That's another parent.
Right.
That's another parent. And after 10 days went by, when they did, and we didn't know this woman, by the way, up until this point. After 10 days went by that they hadn't done anything, she finally reached out to us and said, I'm so and so, and there's something that you really need to see. And I got to tell you, as devastated as we were, and as much as my wife and I were like just desperately searching for answers in those couple weeks, to learn that the school had known about this for 6 weeks, or that this woman had gone to 10 days before, and that they had kept it from us, is so callous and so cruel and so disgusting. It's something we literally, I don't know how we can ever forget that. And the headmaster called me to give his, he and I had never spoken before. He called to give his condolences between the time that she met with us and the time we found out. And he did not mention this. Okay. And I suspect the reason he wanted to talk to me is he wanted to see what I knew. They removed our name and contact info from their directory. Parents had called the school saying, can we reach out to these people? Can we offer our condolences? And the school just said, for no reason, leave these people alone. They don't want to be contacted. They want to be left alone. The school wanted to basically erase us because they were petrified that we would learn what happened. And when we found out, we went and we met with the headmaster. And I said, how is it possible that you and I spoke? You called me, you asked for a call, and you didn't mention this.
What he said?
He actually said to me, he said 2 things that made, one is more offensive than the other, and they make no sense when you put them together. He said, I thought you knew. And he also said, I thought telling you would just hurt too much for you to hear.
That is
okay.
So, I mean, it's obvious they were just trying so hard to brush it under the rug, just to hide it from us and just hope that we would never find out.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
for sure.
so obvious. And I went, one thing, when on January 13th, after this happened, we were so blindsided and didn't know which way was up. My 2 daughters had said to us, please call the schools, because
Did they go to the school? Do your daughters?
our youngest daughter was at Latin school and our oldest daughter was at Francis Parker, which is the rival school. And all 3 of our kids were at Francis Parker. Nate and our daughter had moved over to Latin that year. They said, please call the school and tell them not to send a mass email out about what happened. We're just not ready. And I said, I hear you. I'm going to call right now. So when I called Latin school, and I only got a hold of a social worker, and this was the next morning, I told her what happened, and I had said, we are not equipped to take incoming messaging and information right now. We don't know which way is up. We don't know just what happened. So please, I'm asking you right now, we need privacy, and please don't send out a mass email to 1,000 families, of which 990, we don't even know who they are.
Right.
Okay? So she took that and twisted it. She twisted what I said, and the narrative in the community became, the Bronsteins want their privacy. They don't want to talk to anybody. Leave them alone. And that was what was communicated to the families.
Now, I read somewhere that the school had reached out to you about your son's face mask not being on correctly during class. So it's not like the school never spoke to you before in any capacity. They clearly had, if that is true, what I read, that there is clearly some level of correspondence, but not of something so severe, that they didn't feel like. Is that true?
Correct. So for example, when your child is absent from class, when Nate was absent from class, he was skipping classes because he was having such a hard time there. I get an email saying your child has an unexcused absence from X, Y, and Z. So then I find out, and Nate had called me to tell me, you're going to get an email from the dean of students. I got in trouble about the mask. I said, okay. So I get an email from the same dean of students that my son reported the cyberbullying to. She got notification internally from adults in the school that Nate wasn't following the mask protocols in the school. The mask was supposed to be over the nose, and he was reprimanded for not having his nose covered. So I got an email from the dean of students telling me that she called him into her office to tell him that he needs to follow school protocols on the mask wearing, and to notify me that he's been put on notice that he needs to follow the rules. But yet the same dean of students that my son went to and asked for help, saying, I'm being attacked online, please help me, made the unilateral decision that that wasn't important enough to notify us about. So like the hypocrisy behind that is just, there's just no words.
So, for those who don't know, the Latin School of Chicago is part of the National Association of Independent Schools. They bill themselves as the elite private schools. These are the schools where their children who go there will go to Harvard one day. This is how they tell parents and say, come to our schools. Your child will have a ladder to the most elite groups in the entire country. Did the NAIS, after everything, have they reached out? Did they do anything?
Well, hold on. The gentleman, that former head of school, is a man named Randall Dunn. And Randall Dunn was the head of Latin school. He's the same person who made that disgusting, offensive comment to me, who looked at me with this blank stare when I asked what they were doing to hold people accountable and get to the bottom of this and make sure it doesn't happen again. This stupid blank look he had on his face. The same gentleman is the chairman of the NAIS. Okay. And he's now the headmaster at Rye Country Day. So he's taken his very toxic style to yet another school. So you could say we heard from the NAIS because the chairman of the NAIS was the same person who made these deeply hurtful, offensive, self-serving comments while he was the head of Latin school. And I'm sure you and anyone would wonder, well, why? And look, we don't know why, but I can tell you that on the chain, okay, of the people some of whom were sending the messages, some of whom were just simply on the chain, included the son of the chairman of the board of the school, the son of another board member of the school, the son of the president of a Fortune probably 100 company, the sons of significant donors to the school. So look, I don't know this, but all I can suspect is that he, said, I have to pick between appeasing people with money and power who I want to please and doing the right thing by this family, by this young man, and really doing the right thing as far as the proper way to run a school.
And none of these students were expelled for any of the messages they sent.
Nobody was
nothing.
Nobody has been expelled. No, they were brought in. The team was brought in the day after it happened by the same dean of students. So the same dean of students who was negligent in the care of our child, the administrators pretty much audited themselves. They brought in all the boys into a meeting the next morning and in front of them told them that nobody did anything wrong.
It gets even worse after we sued them. So we sued them, and there was a tremendous flurry of attention and press around it. And a lot of the parents of the bullies actually found out about what happened by us when our attorneys contacted them. The school never contacted most of these people. But anyhow, after there was a frenzy of press and attention and the school was really under pressure, the school called an assembly, and student recorded it. We have a recording, and the headmaster, who's right in the middle of all this, got in front of all the students and basically said, we've done nothing wrong. We have done, like literally, imagine the cynicism of an adult after a child has died. These students are traumatized. Every newspaper and TV station in the city is talking about this, and he has a mandatory assembly where he calls his fellow administrators and makes these students who can't leave, they have no choice but to listen to him. If you think about, he's the head of school and they're just students, and he exonerates himself in front of them. I mean, just stop and try to wrap your mind around the way that this place is run. This is the chairman of the NAIS.
It was Randall Dunn and it was Shelley Greenwood, who was his assistant principal of the school. The two of them were in cahoots together, and they told the children in that auditorium that if anybody ostracizes or lashes out at the kids who were alleged
bullies,
bullies, that they would get in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no. Was there any outcry from other parents? Anyone reach out to you? Not really. No.
If there was, it was all anonymous.
Yeah, please
because
don't tell anyone. We did get anonymous things.
a lot of anonymous letters, a lot of anonymous emails, because there's this, the parents of these private schools are, are cowards. This is
Yeah.
a group of cowards. They seem to be afraid of the own culture, the own toxic culture in these schools. And we see it at Francis Parker and we see it at Latin, that parents don't want to speak out about anything that they don't agree with, or any type of egregious behavior, negligent behavior, situations that potentially could hurt children, because they seem to think that the administration, the faculty is going to lash out at their child, and their child won't get into the desired school that they want,
Yeah.
or the family will be asked to leave because
Yeah.
they're not following the herd mentality. So 99% of the Latin parent community has stayed quiet because they don't have the courage to speak out publicly and say,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this is disgusting. Why is this being handled this way? Why are the Bronsteins been treated this way? It is heads down, eyes down, mouths closed, because they don't want to call attention to themselves, because they're worried about their own kid's path.
And this is
Let me tell you another.
Right.
You
Yeah,
start off by asking about public and private schools, and look, we have experience at a private school, and they're different, but in a lot of ways, it's worse at a private school. It's worse because the big donors and the board members have extra sway very often. It's worse because the parents are paying. They've got to look. This school costs $40,000 a year. So by the time your student is a senior, you've made a $500,000 investment in their education because you think it's going to be a ticket to a great college. Do you really want to rock that boat? And these parents really do believe that the schools have this control over them, and it's just better to not rock the boat. But there have been a lot of people who have come forward in various ways. And one that's, like, I'll give an example. There was a young man who was viciously bullied. He's gay, and he was viciously bullied over his sexuality to the point that he attempted suicide, and he was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward. And after he was released, he went back to Latin, and there was a meeting with all these various people to help him sort of reacclimate to the school. And he called us after he read about our lawsuit. And he said, I've kept this down inside for a few years, but I had to reach out because these are all the same people who failed me. I recognized all the names of the administrators who, after, my psychiatrist worked out a plan and had me meet with these people, they just again let me sort of twist in the wind. And there's another story, and it's incredibly disturbing. But it's now been validated. There was a young woman that was sexually assaulted, and some people told us about it anonymously, that the school refused to call the police despite there being a duty to do so, and despite it being a proper and legal and on and on. And we're like, oh, come on, like, we can't be the repository of every story. And it turns out that there's litigation, and the second in command at the school was deposed under oath a few months ago, and she corroborated it all. We have a copy of the deposition. And again, the person who hid this all, who's told her, don't ask any questions, we're not going to the police, was Randall Dunn, the head of the NAIS. I'll send you the it's public information. It's a deposition that was filed in court.
We'll put it in the show notes for sure. And by the way, this is what I hear from NAIS parents across the country constantly, is that it's these quote unquote tolerant, liberal, progressive, open schools that have some of the worst policies towards children, and they threaten parents with the idea of we will make your child's life hell if you dare speak up against this. So it is shocking. It is shocking that adults fail at the job they work to have. It is horrendous. But I would be lying to say that I haven't heard, to some extent or the other, of administrators within this school system sitting there and working against the interests of students and parents. I want to ask you, for the point of listeners, is what should parents know to do if they have a fear of their child's mental well-being with cyberbullying and with accountability with the administration, what is the process that you have learned now in hindsight, especially to other children? What is the process of how knowing how who's responsible and who's accountable, and how can they get information ahead of time into the activities of these schools? Is there anything?
I mean, right now, until this global mess gets straightened out, because this is happening in many NAIS schools across the country, not just with us, is documenting all communications with administrators, screenshotting everything, keeping a paper trail, and getting an attorney. And until parents start to get the courage to hold negligent administrators responsible through the legal system, this is not going to stop. It's the only thing that's going to start to shift the status quo of these administrators, these schools having so much power and control,
Yeah.
and pushing the parents out of the picture, right? Latin school denied my husband and I the opportunity to protect our son. There's this like culture in these NAIS schools where they don't want parents involved in anything. They want the parents out so that the schools can do whatever they want to do within the school, within the four walls of the schools, without the parents knowing. And that is wrong. I mean, and that's like a narrative that's going on everywhere. And the fact that if that administrator would have called us that day and said, your son came in today to report cyberbullying, the trajectory of our life would have been so different. We would not be having this discussion today.
Right.
She did not have the right to withhold that information from us.
Well,
and she's not even fired. She works there still.
I'll add.
Oh my God, that is.
Oh no, I'll add
She
a little
works.
bit
I mean,
to
the
that.
fact that there's 1,000 kids at that school, and she is a dean of students. She's a top level administrator of the high school, and the parents if I was a parent there, I would not want my child having to rely on that administrator for safety and security.
We've actually settled with a few of the families and we've interviewed some of these bullies, and what they've said, and this is just so disgusting, but that this dean of students has been very overtly over the last year or so sort of reaching out to them and trying to, like, they said they had never spoken to her or heard from her ever before, and she's so cynical that she's trying to curry favor with these students with the understanding they'll probably testify as witnesses at some point in our litigation. But I'll echo what my wife said, which is ultimately the only thing that may hold people accountable is through litigation. And we have sued the Latin school, and we've included in that the parents of the worst bullies, as well as some of the administrators, for precisely that reason. We've also been very, very vocal about the fact that any dime that we collect will be spent on philanthropic purposes and really advocacy toward protecting other children. Now, we are still in litigation, but fortunately, we've not had to wait. We have the means to be doing a lot. We formed the nonprofit organization. We've done a ton, but there are two things that we've done very recently that pertain to your question. One is we worked with several members of the Illinois General Assembly to update a woefully outdated anti-bullying law. The law was so outdated, it, believe it or not, talked about bullying over fax machine. So that'll give you an idea. Yeah, I know. I don't think that's a big.
I didn't expect you to say that. Yeah,
I know. It's pretty.
Actually,
crazy.
The language is still in there.
I know, but
they didn't take it out, which I thought was strange.
But it speaks to how archaic it is. But the point is that the most significant change to the law, which has passed both houses and is on the governor's desk for signature, and it should really say, we believe it will save lives, reduces the period of time by which a school must inform both sets of parents and commence an investigation from 10 days to 24 hours. Okay. Now, again, in the case of the Latin school, they didn't inform us at all, not even in 10 days, but schools who follow the law and who exercise best practices 24 hours, that 9 days is an incredibly valuable period of time. The other thing that we've done,
especially as the bullying continues throughout.
100%, 100%. And the other thing that we've done is we partnered with a well-known law firm here in Chicago to offer pro bono legal support to families who are being victimized by cyberbullying. And we actually emulated a program in Texas, which is through the state. Ours is through our nonprofit foundation that we formed. But the program in Texas has been incredibly effective, because what they found is very often a cease and desist order or even a demand letter can very often sort of lead something off before it spirals in a bad direction. In fact, a lot of the parents of bullies are grateful, and we heard this ironically in our situation as well, as our attorneys have talked to attorneys of other parents, which is, had the school informed me, the parent of the bully, I myself could have done something to discipline my kid or make him do something different. So anyhow, what we brought to the state of Illinois, it actually just launched last week, is pro bono legal support throughout the state for families that don't have the means to hire an attorney. But like my wife said, for the foreseeable future, that is what we would strongly recommend as the way to deal with this, to get yourself legal representation.
Now, Rose, I'm sorry. What were we saying? Finish your thought.
I said, because what we've experienced with the independent NAIS schools is that you can't trust them. You can't trust them. And you, as a customer, right, we're paying customers. So at least we thought, for $40,000 a year, we're getting a service that our child is going to be safe, is going to get a good education, right? In my head, it was money well spent versus being in public school.
Right.
And that is not the case at all. It's actually like a product liability, it was like, they don't follow through on any of that. Like what's even more ironic is they have a handbook with all these policies, and a policy that is set with them, and I'm sure set with the NAIS too. And all these NAIS schools behave the same way. They have set policies. They have zero tolerance bullying policies, but yet they don't follow their own policies.
Well, and
they want to have it both ways. They want to have they have a handbook that's hundreds and hundreds of pages, right? And then when something actually happens, they keep saying, well, everything is at their sole discretion. So they like to circle the wagons. They like to make judgment calls when it works for them. There's nothing that they really don't care about the safety of the child. All they care about is themselves, their reputation, and their money. That's it.
And the boards, someone used this term, I think it's really a great term. They refer to them as vanity boards. It's people who like to show up at the annual fundraiser and think they're big shots. These boards are not even remotely fulfilling their responsibility as trustees.
They're not.
And actually, when we met with Randall Dunn the same day that he made that comment about he thought I knew and so forth, I asked him, does your board know about this? Because this is a serious thing, and it's precisely why a board exists. Okay. And he again gave me a blank stare. He couldn't even understand why something like this would rise to the level of informing the board. A student has died.
I can't imagine what that meeting was like for you that day.
I beg your pardon?
I can't imagine what that meeting was like for you that day.
It was surreal. It was surreal because one, it was a realization of a lot more of the why our son took his life. But again, this idea, it was sort of, it just came at us all at once, this idea that these people who purport to have dedicated themselves to the care and education of children are selfish and self-serving almost beyond words.
The last question I want to ask you about is there's a bill that you've been advocating for called the Kids Online Safety Act. It's a bipartisan bill. It's in the Senate. I think it has 13 or 14 senators, both Republican and Democrat, who have co-sponsored it. Could you talk about the bill a little bit if people want to contact their senators to advocate for it?
Yes, absolutely. Please contact your senators to advocate for it. We need to get something done. COSA is a Kids Online Safety Act. It's been spearheaded by Marsha Blackburn and Richard Blumenthal. They've been pushing this for over a year now. And really the notion is to start to put duty of care on the social media platforms. Big tech is just as corrupt as the tobacco industry was. They're creating algorithms on these platforms that are addicting our children and has created a huge mental health crisis. And our children are on Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram. It's completely unmonitored. It's just the Wild West. And they're being fed information that's so dangerous and causing deadly harm. And you can't hold, right now, the big tech companies are getting away with it. So the notion is to impose the duty of care on these platforms, and to also give the parents, to empower parents to be able to go on these platforms and put security settings on for their children when needed, to also require that these platforms allow third-party auditors to come in and audit their environment to make sure that the platforms are safe. Those are probably like the three biggest things. It's the same, it applies the same thing to anything else, right? Like the car industry, you're not going to give your 15-year-old or 16-year-old the keys to a car that hasn't been designed and manufactured to the highest safety standards, right?
Of course.
And that's not happening with Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok. There are no standards. There's no safety standards at all. And these platforms are marketing directly to our children.
And often parents don't realize these apps know their children better than they do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, just so you know, these apps are designed, they have young people in an open MRI, and they're literally testing what stimulates their brain, the bells and whistles and the likes. It's a 14 or 15-year-old kid on one side of the table and a room full of psychiatrists and engineers with an open MRI testing what stimulates their dopamine in the other. So this idea that, oh, a parent can just tell their kid not to be online, it's literally ridiculous. Like putting your kid on social media without any protection is like, I'm not just giving them the keys to the car. It's like giving them the keys to the car in a place where there are no traffic laws and giving them a bottle of Jack Daniels and maybe sending them to a casino to gamble some money at the other end of it. It is like, good luck. We hope it works out.
Yeah.
We hope the social media companies are thinking about you and worried about you.
And there are many parents out there who blame, I read all the trolls, be a better parent. Don't give your kid a cell phone. Get your kid off of social media. It's like the toothpaste has already been squeezed out of the tube. Like, 97% of the world has a smartphone, is on social media. So like, how are we going to shove the toothpaste back into the tube? Like, it's too late. You can't tell a parent never to give your kid a cell phone or never put them on social media. It's like there needs to be protections in place so that when we do hand our kids cell phones and access to social media, that those protections are there, and that as parents, we're educated enough to know, here are the 5 things that we need to do before we give you the cell phone. And here are the rules and regulations that as children, my child needs to follow to make sure that they are safe online. But that duty of care needs to be put on the social media companies too, to provide a product that is safe for our kids.
Right. And smartphones weren't even around when I was in high school, and I'm not that much older than, I'm getting to my middle age now, so I should stop saying that. But these smartphones were not around for me, and they are far different than they were even 7 years ago. TikTok was not around even 5 years ago. So to understand how algorithms are used and how basically to addict people to it and addict them to, and I, as a full-grown adult with a fairly decent Twitter following, I catch myself sometimes reading negative emails, and I don't even know why. They're messages from strangers. I have no idea why I do it, but sometimes I do it. If that was by people who I knew I was going to see the next day, and it was constant, I could not imagine what it does to their self-esteem and their brain and everything else.
Well, let me move away from the cyberbullying and body image issues to other things, which is pretty much now drug dealers and gun dealers have no need to stand out on the street corner. They use Snapchat because it's safe and effective. And, fentanyl poisoning is the number one, killer among, I think, people under the age of 30 or on the age of 25.
Right.
And I'm sorry?
I said right. Yeah.
And where it's sold is on Snapchat. And a drug dealer geo-targets users in upper middle class areas where they know it's safe to go and sell. We're partnered with a group out of Los Angeles called the Organization for Social Media Safety. We brought their programming and their education in Illinois. They're partnered with UCLA as far as research of online safety. They will tell you that they can start, or they can open a new account and be in a position to be buying drugs or guns online in 2 to 3 minutes. That's how long it actually takes. Secondly, they'll tell you that they might do a search for a topic like drugs, and within minutes they'll be getting messages from people attempting to sell them drugs. So this idea that Snapchat is looking out for kids is nonsense. They are giving their geographic location and their search data to people who want to sell them guns, drugs, sex traffickers, you name it. It is egregious and troubling, and the only thing that will make a difference, it's the same answer when you asked about the schools. The only thing that will make a difference is when there is tremendous financial ramifications for not, running a responsible business that protects its consumers.
Right. And that's the Kids Online Safety Act. I'll put it in the show notes. Rose and Rob Bronstein, I want to thank you for being on this podcast. I want to thank you for talking with your son, Nate, and I wish you all the luck in the world with everything from the lawsuit onwards. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ryan.